All right, very good. We're going to talk about lettering now. And lettering, just like sketching, is a fundamental skill related to technical drawing. In any kind of sketching where you have to add notes, having lettering as a skill will pay off big time. So here's the basic idea. Even on a sketch, there is written information. This sketch has written information about the sizes and locations of the holes, the length of the arms on this L bracket, the thickness of the material, and if it was sloppy, if we couldn't read it, we wouldn't be able to proceed with fabrication. There's also some notes. Again, if they were sloppy, if they were printed poorly, we'd have to call people up to find out, well, what does this thing even say? I can't read it, right? So information on a blueprint, on a technical drawing, must be clear and it must be easy to read. If we look at this architectural drawing here, we see that the information is calling out different kinds of materials. An opening here, cut in the roof by the entry of the door, size of the window, material on the outside of the building. Again, if we couldn't read these things, well, we'd have some problems when we get out in the field and we have to build it. All of the printing on here has to be clear and easy to read. And if we look at it, you'll notice that all the printing is very neat. It's all the same height, right? And it's all very regular. The 8 here looks like the 8 here, looks like the 8 here, right? Every 8 on this drawing looks exactly alike. On this plan for this kitchen here, same thing. All of the measurements need to be printed in a way that makes them easy to read, totally clear. Okay, so that's lettering. Lettering is the drawing, if you want to say it that way, the slow, careful printing of clear and legible notes that technical drawings require. So if you think about it, drawing letters is not that crazy an idea. Letters really are pictures. For example, we've all seen pictographs. Pictographs are pictures that represented words like these Egyptian hieroglyphics. And in the traditional Chinese characters, these are drawn out characters with a brush. A lot of the characters in Chinese, right, in these scripts, involve drawing shapes, and sometimes those shapes are combined together into new words. If we look at the Chinese pictographs, we see that the current symbol for sun looks very much like a circle with a dot in the middle, right? And the moon looks a lot like a crescent moon. So the lettering or the characters in Chinese are also pictographic. Even the alphabet we use, the Latin alphabet, is a pictographic alphabet that's been simplified. So 5,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, they would carve this in the side of a building to represent the ah sound, right? And this has been simplified over time. And here we see the Phoenicians took that ox head and they kind of tilted it on an angle. There's his horns, there's his ears, there's his snout. And eventually it's been flipped to the point where the Romans were writing their their A, like this. So even our own alphabet is a pictographic alphabet at its core. Maybe you remember one of these, huh? Bring back memories of kindergarten. How did you learn to write your letters? Well, you see, you drew them, didn't you? You got a worksheet like this, and you probably traced over the letter A a couple dozen times until you got a feel for it. And then eventually, your practice sheet didn't have things to trace. You were printing it out yourself as carefully as you could. See, for young children, writing is a drawing exercise because they're trying to make the letter perfect. And then when we learned cursive in the fourth grade, right, then we had the same problem. We had to relearn all the letters and how to correctly form the shapes. And what happened? Well, at one point, your printing was probably very good, and your cursive was probably very good also. But then we get lazy, and our brain kind of automatically takes over when it's time to write, and we don't think about the shapes, we just scribble, and eventually we wind up with something called handwriting. Now, handwriting, a lot of times people have terrible handwriting. I myself have terrible handwriting. Handwriting can be sloppy. Handwriting is very stylized to the individual. It's your style of writing. And that's fine. I don't expect you to take notes in lettering. I don't expect you to write a term paper in lettering. You can write your shopping lists and your little notes to yourself on your to-do list with whatever kind of handwriting you want. But you can't write like this on a technical drawing. You have to precisely letter the information. If we took a look at this drawing, it's kind of surprising. Half the drawing was done by hand, half the drawing was done by CAD, and I'm not going to tell you which one is which. Could you tell? If we zoom in a little bit, can you see which one is hand-drawn and which one is computer-created? So it's the top half is hand-drawn. But again, do you see how regular and perfect the printing is on this floor plan? It's almost like a machine made it. So now, in the past, the way that perfect lettering was executed mostly was by practice. But there were machines that helped people to print precisely. This is called a Leroy machine. Basically, it's a plastic template, and you would screw your technical pen into the end of it. Basically, you would trace the letters one at a time onto your technical drawing until you had your words spelled out. This is a slow, pain-in-the-neck process. This little thing looks like a typewriter. It's actually about the size of your hand. It was a typewriter that would be put on top of a technical drawing, and you could type your notes out right there on the drawing. So this is another way that perfect print was applied to drawings, because it is hard to letter perfectly. But really what we're going to do is we're going to just practice. And how do you practice? Well, you take your time, you slow down. You're going to see in the demonstration that lettering is basically drawing each stroke one at a time, instead of trying to rush through and draw everything in a single pass. And there are little things that we can do to make our lettering better. If you look in your toolkit, you have a tool called a lettering guide. It's this piece of plastic here. It's got a vertical line. Well, if your lettering is terrible, you could always use the edge of the lettering guide to make the vertical stroke of the letters that have vertical strokes, like the L, and the I, and the T, and the R, and the E. Another alternative you have is a lettering template. People who have really terrible lettering that need to make decent looking drawings sometimes use these. I wouldn't though. Again, it takes a long time. It's tedious. This is a last resort. If you can print legibly, just take your time and be careful. We'll be fine. You should know that lettering on technical drawings is done in uppercase letters, all capitals. There are no lowercase letters on technical drawings. And then one of the ways to improve your lettering is to use something called a guideline. So guidelines are these horizontal lines that give you a start and a stop point for the top and bottom of each letter. And if you put light guidelines on your drawing, well, at least all of your letters will be the same height. We improve our lettering by kind of relearning how to print. So we look at the shapes of the letters, we talk about spacing, and then we talk about improving through practice. Now we don't have to get really crazy and fancy. The shapes of the letters can be quite ornate, but in technical drawing, Gothic lettering is single stroke, which means you can make it with a pen or a pencil with a single stroke for each element. So the I is a single stroke up and down. The H is 3 strokes, a line up and down, a line up and down, and a bar connecting. Right, and if you look at our little chart here, you'll see the suggestion on how to make the letters using proper forms. Now, one thing you should notice as you go through here is you've got letters with straight line elements. You've also got circular elements. And then once we get down to the numbers, we start seeing oval elements. Now, I'm not saying you have to print like this, but if you had entered this field, industrial drawing, drafting, mechanical drawing, engineering, 20 years ago or before that, you would have spent weeks and weeks doing this to transform your handwriting into something amazing. Now, we don't simply have that much time, right? So we're just trying to go for legibility, but this is the proper form for lettering all of the different elements of each letter. Notice too that the letters are wide. And I think most of us print our letters maybe a little skinny. All of the letters are either square, so they're as wide as they are tall, or wider. Like, look at the M and the W. Very wide, right? And some of those other letters, same deal. For the shapes, letters shouldn't be top heavy, they should look balanced. So here we see the top of the B is just as big as the bottom of the B. Well, if you make it a little set in, well, now it looks like it's more balanced, less likely to fall over. Now, if we were in a high school drafting class, we'd probably do this for a few days. This is what I used to give students to kind of weed them out. It's not a lot of fun, but when you're 14 years old, you don't really want to be there maybe, and you really need to develop your motor skills so that you can do a decent job. We're going to skip the mountain of worksheets on lettering and just go into a couple of simple assignments for our class. You should know too that you need to have proper spacing. For example, in between each line of lettering, you need to have a full space. So if this is a ½ inch tall here, there should be a ½ inch here. ½ inch tall here, ½ inch here. Otherwise, the letters are on top of each other, one line on top of the other, and very hard to read without a gap. Also, spacing between the words, you want to leave a full space, a full letter space in between each word, so that each word is distinct and easy to read. This is some awesome printing on a whiteboard in a gym. I mean, beautiful, beautiful lettering. Look what happens when we don't take the time to space things together, right? So this was actually computer generated. I don't know who made this, but this gives me an epileptic fit almost looking at it. I mean, how are you supposed to read this, right? Really poorly done. One word just turns into the other with no rhyme or reason. And then here's what we see what happens when we don't put a full space in between lines of text. The text lands on top of each other, one line on top of the other. So we need to practice, and you have 2 assignments in your course pack that are going to help you to practice your lettering and improve it. And we'll practice a little more. So the goal is for you to be able to print information on a drawing that is clear and legible. Mostly, all we need to write on a drawing is our name. Occasionally we have to write a note or 2 on the drawing, something very brief. Maybe we have to write the numbers for a couple of measurements. So we're not going to write a term paper or a research paper with lettering. So take the time to make it look good. Good lettering makes a good drawing look awesome. Poor lettering makes a good drawing look shabby. Okay, and we're not going to have to do anything anywhere near as difficult as this, which is good. My lettering is not perfect. I mean, at one time it was pretty good, but I've been spoiled by computers. So I get it. We've got 8 weeks in our class to learn how to do drawing by hand, which includes some lettering. So our goal is to be printing things clearly. There are light guidelines that help us to make everything the same height. All the letters are as uniform as possible. And if you can do that, I will be more than pleased. You should know that some trade areas or some career areas use different styles of lettering. The one for technical drawing is kind of plain. In architectural drawing, you get to use a slightly more stylized kind of lettering. But again, look, every single R looks like every other single R. And while there is a little bit of slant and a little bit of style to this, it is still very regular. Right on our architectural detail here, the lettering is a little less mechanical, a little less like a typewriter, but still very regular.